Good afternoon once again. Hello, everyone. My name is Raymond Johnson, and we are here for another show. Just want to remind you that we meet every single Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern. So we want to welcome you to the live show. If you're watching us live, please let us know where you are watching from. Tell us where you're watching from, what it is that you do, what is your title. We want to make sure that you are able to not only gain information, but let's network, let's connect with each other, and let's make this world a better place. Today, we have a very special guest that is going to be joining us because we're going to be talking about burnout. This is a longtime friend of mine. His name is Victor Bartley, and he is the expert as far as I'm concerned when it comes to being burned out, because not only has he experienced burned out like many of us have, but he's also made his way out of being burned out. And so it's going to be an awesome conversation and dialogue today. And let me just say that, too oftentimes we always try to act as if everything is perfect. LinkedIn is the time to network and to try to act like everything is great and get that good job and make that great contribution. But look, let me tell you something. Sometimes when you're working, you don't feel like working. Sometimes things at home aren't what they need to be. Sometimes things on your job are definitely not what they need to be. And so sometimes what happens is we end up getting burned out. Now, I'm going to leave it to the expert. He is going to explain to us how it is that, or not how it is, but what exactly is burned out. But let me give you my layman's term of what being burned out is. Being burned out is when you're tired of being tired and frustrated with being frustrated because you just can't take it anymore. Right? That's just my layman's term. We could go on and we could dialogue about it, but without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on Victor Bartley, our special guest. Victor, thank you for joining us today. Let's go ahead and let you go ahead and greet the people and get into it. And I've got my questions, so you go ahead and greet the people, and we'll go ahead and I'll give you my first question.
Hey, Raymond, I want to first thank you for inviting me to be on. It's a pleasure to share the space with you, to share in this dialogue on this very important topic that is personal to me, that is deeply personal to me. And so I want to greet each of you that are joining the podcast as well, wherever you are hailing from, wherever you are showing up. We want to thank you for being here today. And so I'm just excited to engage in this talk, this conversation on burnout. Let's get it, man.
Well, man, look, thank you again for coming. But I'm going to ask you my first question. And you heard
Sure.
my little layman's term when it comes to burned out. What exactly is being burned out? Help us out.
Yeah, so I'm going to first kind of do my best to simplify it, because being burnout can be a multitude of things. But to start with, Dr. Herbert Fordenberger in the 1970s, he coined this term as a result of his own experience with what we now call burnout. And he shared it in his book. And so the definition that I'm going to share for starters is going to be the one that he posits in the pages of his book, simply titled Burnout. Burnout is to deplete oneself, to exhaust your physical and mental resources, to pull yourself apart essentially by excessively striving
Ooh,
for unrealistic expectations that have been imposed on you by yourself or by the values of society.
man, you said that. You said excessive. That's the word that got me.
Yeah, yeah,
Excessive. How
yeah,
did you
yeah.
put that? Excessive what?
Excessive striving, excessive
Oh,
striving.
man, no,
Yeah,
no,
the
no.
the
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
yeah,
Go ahead.
man. No. So that's the technical definition that he provides in his book. For those that may still be a little torn about it, I like to simply classify it as a chronic form of stress
Mm-hmm.
that springs from striving for success.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like how you put that. The excessive striving. So, as you know,
Mhm.
we talk heavily about the DISC assessment and how we prefer to show up at work, at home, and
Mhm.
play. We talk about the values and we talk about our attributes of how we think and make decisions. But when you say excessive striving, that gets me to
Yeah.
thinking that that person who is that high D, that driving, decisive, give me results type of individual, whether they score that way on their assessment or behave in that way, and they're really something else. I call them imposters, but it doesn't matter. The bottom line is their values is what drive them, that economic, to get those results. And so you said excessive driving. I can think of myself, I can think of so many people who are always trying to get it right. And listen, you don't have to be a high D, you can be a high C, a high S, you can be anyone who identifies with any of the four types of the DISC assessment. And if you're excessively striving because of something that you put on yourself or something that others have put on you, you can lead to burnout. So that's crazy. So man, tell me, how is it that we can protect ourselves against being burned out?
Yeah, the simple answer is open our eyes and see. You know, it's kind of funny. Dr. Freudenberger speaks about burnout in some respect being a form of blindness. That we are blind to how deeply attached we are to certain values that are not serving us in the best way, or that served us at one point for a season, but no longer are necessary for the current season that we're in.
Mm.
And so, if we are not aware of where our blind spots are, we are very vulnerable to burnout in that particular aspect of our life. But it also, burnout is not just related to work, as you mentioned before, with our personalities and how we show up in various spaces. It can occur in a variety of forms that are manifest at work, that can manifest at home, that can manifest in purpose burnout. It can manifest in a variety of ways, but it's all classified under this form that we're talking about today of.
Wow, wow. I like the way you put that because you talked about being aware of your blind spots. Now,
Mhm,
when we get to the attributes, we really
mhm,
focus on what that individual's blind spots are, whether it's empathy or any of the things that come along with empathy. Maybe perhaps it's the doing part of what needs to be done, where people think that they can do it, but that may be not their strength. That may be their blind
mhm,
spot. Or maybe even
mhm.
perhaps it's that 30,000 foot view where you can look at the situation before it's done and you can see the possibilities, right? And so
Yeah.
sometimes we have these different blind spots, and that falls into the categories of strategic planning and
Mhm,
empathy and all kinds of other things. It's important to know where your blind spots are, because when you don't know where your blind spots are, what essentially ends up taking is you end up being burned out. I have a coworker friend of mine who he literally thinks that he's God's gift to the world, and he thinks that he can do it. He can do it all. But when you look at him, man, that's my boy, that's my dude. But he is blind to the fact that that is
mhm,
not his strength. He's got the heart
mhm.
for it, he's got the desire, but it's just not what he's best at. In fact, what he's best at is being empathetic towards other people. So we can be in a workplace, and we can be working in the wrong area, and we can end up being burned out.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I'm glad you added that because the burnout experience, the burnout episodes, or experiencing the burnout syndrome can not just happen because you're out of pocket, but you can be in alignment with purpose
Mm,
and not be in touch with what your expectations are that
mm,
are driving you,
mm,
or the ones that are controlling you that others have that they're pressing on you. And so this out of alignment is really where this can be driven. This is what it can be driven by, being out of alignment as well. Even if you're enjoying your work, or you think that you're fine. Not everybody, that, as you said before, not everyone that is functioning at a high level is may really be dealing with burnout. We just had a recent report from Australia, the prime minister there, and she stepped down. She resigned from her post,
yeah.
and according to what is cited as the reason, burnout.
Wow. Now that's the part of the story I didn't know. So she was basically
Yeah,
burned out. I
yeah,
heard on the
yeah.
news they were saying on NPR how she, she went through COVID and she went through all
Hmm.
these great things. So what is it? So she was burned out. Man, that is so burnout
Yeah.
is a more common problem than we realize. So how common really is it to be burned out?
Yeah, no, it's very common. In fact, when Dr. Fortenberger introduced this idea in the 1970s, it was almost presented, it was almost, uh, it, it was it was reluctant. People were, I should say, were reluctant to accept it as authentic, and it was more so seen as pseudoscience. And so, I believe that as we've come closer to the turn of the century, and even obviously still living in the aftermath of the height of the pandemic, it became more of a buzzword. It
Mm,
became more of a buzzword, but the statistics point to the fact that particularly, the healthcare space is an industry that was deeply highlighted during the pandemic. It was almost presented as though burnout was something that just occurred as a result of the pandemic. And while the pandemic did produce burnout for some, statistics point to the fact that it was an ongoing reality for nurses, at least reported for at least a decade prior
wow.
to the pandemic.
Wow.
So it's something that's been ongoing, that's been high, and often goes unrecorded. We know about it obviously in the setting of work, but sometimes work may be the escape for where people are experiencing burnout in other areas of life.
Hmm.
And so, it's hard to get a to wrap ourselves completely around the true numbers as to who has experienced burnout or who is burned out. But the number is high. I believe it's a very and I call it a uh, very common occurrence, very similar to my recent injury that I experienced just 6 months ago. I ruptured my Achilles tendon, and I knew immediately when it happened. But when I went into the doctor, something was very interesting that he shared just kind of off the top. He said, "Hey man, we're going to take care of you. We're going to do the surgery. You're going to be well. It's going to take some months to heal, but there's a process." But he added something to this. He said, "I know that you're trying to figure out what happened, but I want you to know that this is very common for men, particularly at your
Wow.
age."
What?
And I'm thinking to myself, like, this is a major injury, and you telling me this is very common?
Right, right, right.
And so, he, just kind of kept telling stories of surgeries that he's done and the repair, and he was a great surgeon. Shout out to my wife for helping me to find that surgeon, but it's common.
Mm,
And as serious of an injury as the Achilles rupture is, I believe likened to it is burnout. It's a serious injury, psychological injury that happens very frequently, and many times people act as though it is something that is minor, and they'll just live with it.
wow. Wow.
I'll just live with burnout. And so, no one would imagine me living on a ruptured Achilles and being okay. Like
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
would not be expected. Like
No.
most people would say, you need to go and get that checked out. You need to get that repaired. You need to go do
Right.
some therapy. Like what?
Right.
That's the expectation for
Yeah.
the physical health.
Right.
But when it comes to the psychological health and well being, there are these expectations or stigmas that are surrounding well being that are often pushed against. And we see this often in burnout. So people are very often more burnout than they articulate or speak about. And many times when people come to me, it's when they've kind of gotten to the wits end and they haven't figured out how to fix it on their own.
Right.
And it's a bit out of hand. But yes, it's to answer the question simply, it is very common.
So help me with this. Then, is there a litmus test where a person can determine whether or not they're burned out? Because let's just be honest. Sometimes you just may not like your job, and that's not necessarily being burned out. You just, maybe you're not a good fit or whatever. But is there a litmus
Sure.
test that helps us determine whether or not we're burned out?
Yeah, no, you make a great point. There's some overlap with some other psychological experiences to burnout, and so there can, as I said before, there can be some complexity to singling it out at times. It may be mixed up with some other experiences, some other diagnosis, and it may not be the only thing that you are battling. But as far as it relates, I would start off with a simple inventory. Is where I often begin with those that I work with. A few questions that give a barometer, a sense of where you are on the burnout scale
Mm,
that Dr. Fortenberger introduces. Because as you said, sometimes it can be that you are dealing with a high pressure scenario, and you're just adjusting to the fact that it's high pressure.
mm, mm,
And that's life sometimes.
mm.
But what we're talking about when we talk about chronic forms of stress, which burnout is classified under, we're talking about prolonged and intense forms of stress.
Prolonged and
So
intense.
yeah, prolonged, the time frame, looking back over a couple of months at least, and then you're talking about it being deeply intense, and there's no let up, there's no relief that's coming um, from the stress that you're experiencing.
So would you say there's, you said there's an inventory to take, and for the viewers, we'll make sure that we put that in the show
Hmm.
notes so you can have access to that and get in touch with Victor. But is there a way that a manager can identify I don't know, are there red flags a manager can at least pay attention to because their employee may be burned out in order to get them the help?
Absolutely, absolutely. A couple of things. Attitude is the person showing some forms of cynicism. Are they disconnected from the work, being specifically their energy? Is it very low on the job? We know about in workplaces and spaces how energy is contagious, particularly negative energy is probably more noted, and we know positive energy as well. As culture is bred and passed along within organizations through energy primarily, but negative energy is one that can be a sort of kind of eyeball test. Is their energy consistently very low? I'm not talking about a bad day, but we're talking about bad months, bad couple of weeks. And then another thing is they just are detached. There's this detachment and disconnection from themselves, and they just are numb.
Mm,
And that can be, and those are things that you discover when you ask questions.
mm,
As a manager, as a leader, it's recommended that you are also a coach.
mm,
In the basic sense of coaching, you may not classify yourself as an expert coach, but when I say coaching, I mean being able to talk with those that you influence, that you hold authority over, particularly within the organization, and find out where their problems are and help them find solutions. And if burnout is one of those things that may come up, if you don't have the solution, pointing them in the direction that may lead them on the path and guide them to healthier well being. And doing that out of concern, because part of the reason that people don't speak about burnout is because of the fear that it's going to threaten their status,
oh wow,
fear that it's going to threaten their position,
I could see that.
fear that it's going to look bad on the reviews.
Yeah,
And so, and that's because we've stigmatized stress.
yeah. Ooh,
If you're a great leader, if you're a great performer, then you won't be stressed. But the
mm,
reality is, we all stress.
that's right.
It's
Yeah,
a biological response.
right.
If we didn't experience it, we would not be human.
Mm,
And so, really releasing, taking that stigma off of stress, particularly in the form of burnout, is an important aspect of coaching employees through the journey of what I call burnout recovery.
And what you said about coaching is paramount for any
Hmm.
manager, supervisor, director. I mean, that is powerful because when I listen to the signs of the litmus test of being burned out, the first thought that comes to my mind is it sounds almost like depression. And you know what I
Yeah,
mean? And if you're
yeah.
not trained, you can, I don't want to say misdiagnose, but you
Hmm.
can misdirect or you can misassess. And what we
Yeah.
want to do is recognize that you need to, of course, develop relationships with
Hmm.
your employees, with your coworkers, and you want to be able to establish relationships where you have an open dialogue policy, so to speak, and you can talk.
Hmm.
Because listen, if you're close enough with an individual, you can find out what needs to be found out by simply having a discussion with them and just asking the person. But coaching is so much more of an advantage because you don't want to mess things up and go in the wrong direction. So tell me, let's say we found somebody, we've got somebody
Yep.
who needs help. We may need help. We have a friend who needs help, or a coworker, a subordinate. What are the steps that that person needs to take in order to address being burned out?
Yeah. The first thing is going to be to acknowledge it. That's first and foremost. As we kind of going back to what we spoke about earlier, burnout is a form of blindness, to some degree, and so acknowledging that I've been operating blind is an incredible first step, and it cannot be overemphasized that burnout often lingers and recycles because of denial. In my own experience, that was the case. I had within a about 8 year period, three major episodes of burnout, and with each episode, I experienced it becoming more intense and layered. And so in the first experience, I deeply remember being fatigued and
Mm-hmm.
emotionally tired. In the next one, I sensed this sense of depression. In fact, and to the point that you were making, I thought it was depression. I went in, all of the signs checked out normal. My levels were normal when I went into a therapist, and I said, "I'm not myself, but the studies, the reports are saying that I'm not depressed." And so that can be one of the symptoms of burnout. I didn't know at the time, that I've come to understand. And then in the last one, in the last episode, on top of the emotional fatigue and on top of the sense of depression or the symptom of depression, there was this desire to just quit.
Whew, yes,
And
yes.
so it had not come to the point of suicidal plans or
Mm-hmm.
things of that nature, but that's where the threshold begins,
Mm-hmm.
where you just lose desire to try, to fight, to continue on in whatever course or path you're going in. And at that point is where I said, this is something that's reoccurring. I've got to address this. And so the first thing that was pivotal for me and other experts resonate with this idea that got to admit it,
Mm-hmm.
have to start off acknowledging it. The second thing that I would recommend is identifying a coach, or a therapist that can support you through burnout. That can be a process. I work as a coach, particularly specifically with burnout. I don't deal with any other mental health challenge. Exclusively burnout is the lane that I operate in. You can also obviously find clinical therapists that can also speak to this. And sometimes when it comes to looking for therapists on your own or through the EOP, there can be a challenge at times because you're saying like, I don't like that therapist, or I went and I didn't enjoy it, or those sort of feelings and emotions that come up. Sometimes it's a matter of learning to just work through the discomfort and the dis-ease, but other times it's the matter of finding the right fit. Finding the right fit can be a process as well. So I would ensure that I think working with someone is going to be extremely important. In most cases, if yours is a milder case of burnout, you may be able to make some slight adjustments and kind of move away from it. But I think long term, as I share with those that I work with, the goal is not just to get out of this episode, but is to practice prevention for the rest of your life.
Oh, all right.
To build a system where this isn't going to be something that I'm just constantly living in, but to be a something that I leverage in order to build life again.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hey, Vic, you got me, man. I'm writing. I couldn't find my notebook, so I'm writing on the back of a receipt.
Hey man, it's
You
paper.
know,
It's
it's
paper.
paper, right? So I had to grab it. But look, I like what you said. You said acknowledge it, and you said
Yeah.
address it. Number two, address it. And I
Yeah.
love how the goal to address it is to practice prevention. I mean, that's powerful right there because no matter what setting you're in, it's not just work, because I like how you talked about earlier the stigma that we have, and this is why we
Mhm.
don't do anything or speak up. But this could be in all kinds of areas of your life. In fact, I'll,
Yep.
I'll ask you one more question. What are some of the areas, or I don't even know how to put it, but what are the walks of life that people are coming from who you find that you're coaching are burned out?
Yes, so it can be in a variety of industries. Many of the times it's personality is connected to one's personality. So just not the person that's in a particular job or field or industry. It's the person and their personality in that profession. The
Sorry about that.
combination of those. Oh, no, 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 no.
No,
The
no, go ahead.
the
Yeah.
combination of those. Yeah, the combination of those is often what creates the combustible reaction.
Hmm.
And so it can happen across fields. It's more common though in service fields, fields where you are in the service industry, um, and human, and you're constantly working in relationships with people. So that can be just about any role. But I've talked to those that are in the tech. I've talked to those that are in education. I've talked to those that are in, hospital, um, as employees and administrators. So it can vary. I've talked to pastors. It can range, social justice advocates. It's not specific to a a industry. It's more important to honestly address what um, your personality is and being aware of who you are, and if, as you the term you use, if you're an imposter, if you're trying to fit into this image, that's a part of your definition of success, that you're pushing towards, that's against who you are. So it gets back to addressing that more. But to answer the earlier question as to the areas that it can show up in, I like to consider them as trigger points.
Hmm.
It can be triggered by your childhood. I like to call it the speaking voices or your talking tree. Our roots and our background, our family history, our families of origin often contribute ingredients to our lives unknowingly many times, that show up later in life as the very ingredients that create the atmosphere for burnout to fester, to grow, and to explode in. So you can be that. It can be, obviously, we know we just gone through a pandemic, health crisis, both at a social level and a personal level, can trigger burnout as well. If it's a personal, um, caregiving is another one,
Mm-hmm.
that's related to health.
Yep.
That's something that's becoming more common,
Mm-hmm.
among families. It can be a relationship,
Yep.
that you're in, whether it's a marriage, whether it's parenting, whether it's friends or partners, business partners, relationships. Disconnection in relationships can create it. A dissatisfaction or lack of clarity around your life purpose, can also be a source of creating this experience. And then also there can be this can be caused by an overload on, technology, and the various forms of it, that we can become so deeply addicted
Yep.
to.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are. I think I gave about six. Oh, sorry, I left out one. Societal caste,
Mm.
is another major one that is often unspoken about. Obviously, you hear about it more in the DEI space. The DEI practitioners and, experts, speak about this more specifically. But caste referring not just to racism and sexism, but the various forms of hierarchy that we create that determine human value in our society, can be a cause, can be a contributor, a trigger, for burnout. So these six areas can work in combination. They can be isolated, or they can be sort of staggered, where one was initially the issue, and then another became a layered issue. So, they can work in dynamic ways, but being able to identify those, which area is the biggest issue for you, would be a great place for starting to uncover, what's at the bottom of that, so to speak, that tree.
That's powerful. I mean, that you just opened up my whole world. I had thought about so much, especially the caretaker.
Yeah,
I took care of my mother for a few years before she passed, and that was a
man.
while back. And there
Wow,
was
I'm
at one
sorry,
point I
man.
felt so guilty, man. I felt so
Mm,
guilty being burned out. I was like, how could you? This is your mother. Look at all she's done for you. And I had all these voices or these
yeah.
tape recorders going off in my head.
Mhm,
And then I had
mhm,
to
mhm.
realize, look, I'm tired just because this is hard. This is tough emotionally, physically, socially, financially. It's just difficult on so many different levels. And I had a great church support group that was able to help me, who was able to be there for, and it helped me come out of that being burned out stage. And so, yeah, it's a very common thing. Victor, tell me, how is it that we can reach you? Tell me how we can reach you.
Yeah, the best way is to start, with my website, victorspeakslife.org. And, on the website, you can, select, connect with me, and, fill out the form there, and that'd be the easiest way to do it. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle there is stampout.burnout. You can find me there and follow me there, or you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm just Victor, Carl Bartley there, and, I would love to connect with you in one of those forms.
I'm so glad you said that because I look for you on LinkedIn and I've known you forever. And I did not know that's your middle name.
My middle name, yeah, my middle
I
name. My
couldn't
middle
find
name
you.
is,
I said, where's
yeah,
the dude? I know he's on here. So,
yeah.
okay.
So that's why I added it, because there's so many other
Yeah.
Victors.
Okay. Smart man.
Yeah,
Smart man. Hey, everyone,
yeah,
you heard it right here. We got Victor Bartley. He is certified in this area. He is there to help you.
yeah.
So please give him a call. We got it on the screen right here. Victor Speaks Life. We'll make sure that we put all his other ways of finding him. But remember, you can also find him on LinkedIn right here. Victor, what is it? Victor Carl
Victor Carl Bartley. Yeah,
Bartley. All right.
yeah.
Hey, be blessed. Have a wonderful day. Take care.